Hello, I'm Ciarán Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Seamus McMenamin, the sheep meat sector manager with Bord Bia. Seamus and I discussed the market situation this year, with Seamus starting off discussing the trade this year to date and the impact the tight lamb supply has had on price. We discussed the impact it has had on the export market and the fact that despite lower volumes of exports, the value of them have gone up, reflective of the higher global demand for sheep meat. Seamus discussed how the trend in lamb supply week on week is lower this year to date relative to previous years, and we move on to discuss how that increased demand in EU markets is influencing the sector. Also, the impact that the UK sector supply into the EU has had on this, and the potential for Irish lamb to increase its market share. Seamus discusses how to open up the food service may impact demand in the market, and what to expect for the summer period with the upcoming Eid festival in July. We finish up discussing the lamb export trade this year to date, but we start off with Seamus giving us a recap on what we've seen in the trade so far this year.
Yeah, it's been a very positive start to the year. I suppose the key driver behind it is just been tight supply of sheep. And if we look at the lamb and the hogget throughput for the year to date, we're probably running 10 or 11% behind where we would be in previous years. I suppose that there's been a few things that have fed into that. There was quite a strong back end in 2020. The sort of good prices and sort of good enough weather encouraged a lot of producers maybe to kill lambs or earlier than they might have. So there was a notable decline in the number of hoggets carried into this year. And then on top of that, then there's been a reduction in the number of lambs coming and hoggets coming from Northern Ireland. So for the year to date, we're probably talking about 30,000 head less.
It certainly, Seamus, it certainly helped things coming in, I suppose. And you mentioned on a previous podcast, we seen the kill last year. Carcass weight wise was, I think, half a kilo less than in previous years. That moving on the lambs earlier, the lack of that carried through hoggets, it had a big positive impact on the supply this spring.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. There was, you're talking somewhere in the region of about 80,000 less carried over, or 50,000 carried over, and then 30,000 less coming from the north. So the hogget kill was probably back about 80,000 head, which is just significant. And then, as you said, then the lighter carcass weights have encouraged men to kill them lighter, and the strong prices encourage men maybe to offload them a wee bit quicker than they previously would have. And that's something maybe that's been coming through at the minute, even in the spring lamb kill, with reports maybe of men killing lambs, but before they're ready, really at lighter carcass weights and underfinished, just with the strong prices. So I suppose that'll be one thing, make sure that you're producing your lambs that meet the market specs.
Yeah, it's that balance of chasing that price drop and actually having a lamb that's suitable to go in, at all times, as you said there, it should be a well-covered lamb meeting the criteria.
Yeah, exactly, because it's no good to the farmer or the processor really unless it's meeting those sort of specification requirements.
Seamus, that lower supply, has it had an impact on our total production from an export point of view?
Yeah, in terms of our export for the first quarter, obviously with the very strong prices, we've seen an increase in the export value of sheep meat. So if you take the first 3 months of the year, is the latest data that we have, you're talking a total value of 94 million. So that's up just over 7% from the same period last year. However, just with the notable decline in throughput, the volume of exports is actually back about 16,000 tonnes, so back 12%. But obviously, it's just been offset by the higher value. There has been some resistance to the strong prices from some of the major customers in Europe, but overall, there's a very tight supply of sheep meat globally. So particularly what's coming from Australia and New Zealand into the EU market. So the Irish lamb has benefited in sort of reduced competition from imports, as well as sort of reduced production in the EU. So it really is very much driven by supply and demand. We had product to sell into the EU market at a time when prices were good and competition was a bit less.
It's very much limited. It's very much worked in its favour, and it's great to see it for once coming in that direction. Look, you mentioned about spring lambs being slow to come out. Maybe just give a bit of context around that, week on week, what has the trend in kill looked like this year by comparison, we say, to 2020?
Yeah, well, we were actually probably started just after Easter there. The spring lamb kill actually started off quite firmly and ahead of previous years, probably just driven by that Easter demand and strong prices. But since then, the kill just really hasn't hasn't appeared in any great numbers. I suppose the cold weather during May and grass supplies and things maybe slowed a lot of lambs down on farm. But at the minute, in most weeks to date, you're running 4,000 to 5,000 behind where they would be in previous weeks. Now it has improved there. Last week it was only 3,000 behind, the same week last year. But so we would expect a strong increase in sort of lambs coming out in the weeks ahead. But the kill to date's been quite subdued compared to previous years.
Look, at Northern Lamb always make up a part of our market. Like, have we seen a bit of a tail off in the amount of them coming down this year?
Yeah, it's just really been a continuation of last year. Towards the end of last year, the processors in Northern Ireland became very active and sort of wanted to keep a larger portion of the lambs themselves, and that sort of continued on into this year. Just with tighter supplies and strong demand from the processors in the north, it's just sort of left less lambs available for coming south of the border for processing. So I think there was somewhere in around 3,000 coming down a week at the minute, which is behind where it would have been in previous years. So if you look at the year to date, you're probably talking 35,000 less sheep coming down the road.
Look, you mentioned there earlier about like supply in Europe is challenging at the moment for them. If we looked across the world, the UK market, there would have been one of the bigger exporters into it. What's been happening with it at the moment?
Well, last year, I think I've mentioned the last time we spoke, was that their exports to the EU were back about 12% last year, just driven by a greater focus on the domestic market and less supplies for export. So I think that's expected to continue on into 2021. I think they're predicting a further 4% decline in what's available to export, and again, that's greater domestic focus and a reduction in their availability for export. Their sheep flocks hold more or less steady. I think they've around about 14 million ewes thereabouts, but just their production and their availability for export is back. Obviously, with the less product they're then exporting to Europe, that then gives us greater opportunity to sort of gain market share, because they would have been our biggest competitor there on a like-for-like basis.
It leaves more room in that market. I suppose it draws us to the question that probably most of our listeners want to know, and it's the price-related question. Like, normally this time of year, a mid-season lamb is starting to come on stream. We see our supply starting to ramp up, and logically, price will tailor off. The suspicion, Seamus, is this year that it mightn't just dip quite the same as previous years, given the fact that demand is potentially higher in the EU.
Yeah, well, we're coming off a very strong price, and as you've mentioned, we would expect the price to come back just in line with the increased throughput coming out. Now there has, as I said, there's been some pushback from some customers in Europe to the strong price, but the underlying thing is just that there's tighter supplies, and production in the EU is expected to be back a couple of percent again this year. And then on top of that, then a lot of the product we would have been importing from New Zealand has been redirected to China. So there's good opportunity there to grow Irish exports to the EU, and it's sort of our priority market because it's our closest and probably our highest value.
Good chance to capitalise on. So look, I suppose the other big thing that's happening right across Europe, and we've seen it here domestically as well, is food service is opening up again. There is events, particularly on the continent, starting to open up. I suppose what bucked the trend last year, Seamus, our domestic consumption increased. Obviously, food service dropped off. What impact will opening up of food service this year have on demand for lamb? And we're going to look at a bit of a trade-off with retail.
Yeah, that's exactly it. A bit of a trade-off maybe. Retail demand for lamb did grow just on the back of COVID restrictions and increased maybe interest in the category, particularly in the domestic market, but also in the EU. I suppose as we shift back over to food service, we'll obviously see a lot of consumers shifting from in-home eating to out-of-home eating, and it's just then you're competing against the other proteins there as well. So while we've made gains at retail, and food service and open will create opportunities, there could be a trade-off there in terms of one will replace the other. But overall, lamb demand is steady, and with tighter supplies, there should be opportunity there for Irish products.
Hopefully we can maintain consumption levels. Like, I suppose, Seamus, just moving forward, looking at the rest of the summer, we've seen a spike there for Easter and festivals after it. We've Eid coming up in July. What impact is that going to have on demand?
Yeah, there's a tend to be a peak demand for for lamb just in around the Muslim festivals. So the Muslim festivals and Easter just appear to do have a huge impact on lamb prices and lamb demand in the run up to them. So as you mentioned, Eid's towards the end of July this year, so that would be expected to sort of help keep the floor under prices and firm enough demand for lamb, just to sort of coincide with our peak production. And then as we move into the rest of the year, there has been an increase in the ewe flock this year, by just under 3%. And if you take that, combine that then with the quite favourable sort of lambing conditions we've had this year. I know it's been cold, but there hasn't been that sort of real miserable wet weather that lambs don't like. So the lamb crop would expect to be bigger this year. So supplies are expected to remain fairly firm then for the rest of the year. And hopefully we'll have the demand to hold up the trade.
James, just like a final aspect of demand, the live export trade, it is a component of our market. How has that fared out this year so far?
Yeah, there's been some interest anyway, definitely from some markets for live sheep. I think last year we did send out 30,000 sheep, and I know there's been a few thousand gone this year already. But hopefully as the year progresses, we'll see a bit more interest there in export some of these sheep live to markets within the EU.
It's providing another outlet for it. Look, Seamus, it's great to have a bit of a positive news story for the industry. You have a webinar coming up on this tomorrow night with a bit more in-depth analysis of the market. Where can anyone who wants to tune into that register?
Yeah, we have a market outlook sheep webinar just tomorrow evening. You can register just through the events section of the Bord Bia website. We'll just be giving a market outlook and looking at a few changes to the QA scheme. We're bringing in a carbon calculator into the sheep scheme, which will be useful when marketing our lambs. And then we just have a guest speaker then, and Brian Nicholson, just to give us an update on his sheep farm for the year to date.
For anyone interested, it'd be well worth tuning in. James, look, it was great having you on. It's great to have a bit of a positive outlook for the summer. We've had a good year so far. Hopefully we'll get you on the back end and it'll have held up well.
No worries, Ciarán. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll have to finish things up at this point. It was great having Seamus on again, giving us that market update and outlining what's happened this year to date. It's good to see a great demand for Irish lamb at the moment, particularly in EU markets. Hopefully it's something we can capitalise on and the price will hold up for the remainder of the year. We'll have a positive year out of it. For anyone interested in that webinar, the details are on the events section of the Bord Bia website. That'll be held on the 16th of June at 7:30 p.m, just for anyone listening back in case they miss it. So look, anyone who wants to just register there, I'm sure it'll be of interest to many. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciarán Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to any of our episodes.